Hi, welcome. Enjoy the content, subscribe, and turn on notifications.
Charles Cooper had built his financial consulting firm from the ground up. At 38, he managed a portfolio of corporate clients who trusted him with decisions involving millions of dollars. His routine was meticulous. He woke up at 6 in the morning, reviewed financial reports before coffee, and always kept his schedule tightly organized. Lauren, his 35-year-old wife, worked as an event coordinator for mid- to large-sized companies in Chicago. They'd met 7 years ago at a business conference where she was organizing the event and he was one of the speakers. They got married 2 years later in an elegant ceremony by Lake Michigan, with vows Charles believed were as solid as the numbers in his spreadsheets. Their home in Lincoln Park was spacious and tastefully decorated, a reflection of Lauren's good taste and the financial stability Charles provided. Lauren had always been sociable and outgoing, loving to host friends for wine and dinner on weekends. Charles, more reserved, would join those gatherings politely but usually excused himself early to work in his home office, leaving the women to chat freely in the living room. It was a dynamic that worked well for both, or at least that's what Charles thought until that Friday in October. That night, Lauren had invited 3 friends over for dinner. Charles prepared the first round of drinks, exchanged a few pleasantries about work and city news, then excused himself, saying he needed to review some important contracts. He went up to his second-floor office, turned on his computer, and dove into risk analysis spreadsheets. An hour later, he realized he'd left his phone in the kitchen. He walked quietly downstairs, his footsteps muffled by the carpet. Laughter and the clinking of glasses drifted in from the living room. That's when Charles heard Lauren's name mentioned in a conspiratorial tone that made him stop in the hallway, still out of sight. "Lauren, you're terrible," one of the friends said between giggles. "Those secret little getaways of yours are going to get you in trouble someday." More laughter followed. Charles felt a strange knot in his stomach, a twinge of discomfort he tried to ignore. Maybe it was about some surprise Lauren was planning, he thought. But then another voice, from the friend he knew as Brenda, added with a knowing edge, "At least you're enjoying yourself while you can, right? What Charles doesn't know won't hurt him." The laughter that followed carried something conspiratorial, shared secrets that shouldn't exist. Charles stood frozen in the hallway, his heart racing despite himself. His rational mind, trained to analyze data and spot patterns, began processing that information differently. Secret getaways. What Charles doesn't know. The way Lauren laughed, a nervous laugh he didn't fully recognize. He didn't go into the room. Instead, he silently returned to his office, picked up his phone from where he'd left it minutes earlier, and came back down, intentionally making noise on the stairs. When he walked into the living room, the women were all chatting about party decorations, the mood light and normal. Lauren smiled at him with the same smile he'd known for years, and Charles smiled back, but something inside him had shifted. That night, after the friends left and Lauren fell asleep beside him, Charles lay awake staring at the ceiling. The words echoed in his mind. Secret getaways. He wasn't a paranoid or jealous man, but he wasn't naive either. In recent months, Lauren had changed small habits. She'd started going to the gym more regularly, always on Tuesdays and Thursdays at lunchtime. She'd come home energized, talking about how the workout refreshed her. There were also those client happy hours that went late into the night, and a weekend when she said she needed to attend an events conference in Indianapolis, returning only Sunday evening. Charles had thought it all perfectly normal, even encouraged it. Now, every little detail took on new weight in his analysis. Saturday morning, Lauren left early, saying she had a meeting with a client to plan a corporate event. Charles waited until she was gone, listened to her car drive off, then went to the home office where they kept their shared laptop. It was a computer they both used for household matters, personal finances, and online shopping. Charles knew the password. They'd never kept secrets from each other, or so he believed. He opened the laptop and went straight to the browser history. Lauren had recently cleared everything, which was odd because she'd never done that before. Charles wasn't a tech expert, but he knew the basics. He checked their shared email account and found nothing suspicious. Then he remembered that Lauren had a personal work email account. He knew the password because she'd written it on a sticky note stuck to the monitor months earlier when she'd needed him to forward an urgent file while she was traveling. He hesitated for a moment. This was an invasion of privacy, a breach of trust. But the words from the night before came back forcefully. Secret getaways. Charles typed in the password and accessed Lauren's personal email account. The inbox was full of professional emails, event confirmations, and vendor conversations, nothing unusual. But when he clicked on the deleted messages folder, he found something that made his world begin to crumble. There were dozens of emails exchanged with an address he didn't recognize, nicholas.torres.fit@gmail.com. Charles opened the first message and read it. Can't wait for Tuesday. You know how you drive me crazy. Lauren's reply, I'm counting the hours too. That hotel near the airport, noon? Charles felt like the air had been ripped from his lungs. He kept reading, message after message, each worse than the last, references to meetings, physical compliments, schedule coordination. The name Nicholas often appeared signed as, your favorite personal trainer. Charles closed the laptop and stood up from the chair. His hands trembled slightly, but his mind was already working. A personal trainer. Lauren had mentioned casually, months earlier, that she'd hired a trainer to help her stay in shape. Nicholas Torres, from Elite Fitness, the same gym she attended. Charles had even heard the name a few times, always in innocent contexts. Nicholas suggested I change my diet. Nicholas said I'm making good progress. Charles had never suspected anything. Why would he? Lauren had always been independent and sociable, and he'd trusted her completely. But now, mentally rereading every mention of Nicholas, every extra workout, every schedule change, Charles saw a different pattern emerging. This wasn't paranoia. It was facts, data, evidence. He needed more information before acting. Charles was methodical, and even as pain began settling in his chest, he wouldn't act on impulse. He picked up his phone and searched for private investigation services in Chicago. He found 3 well-reviewed firms, chose one called Midwest Investigations, and called. A man with a deep voice answered and introduced himself as Jack Donovan, a private investigator with 20 years of experience. Charles explained the situation directly, without beating around the bush. I need confirmation and photographic evidence, if possible. My wife might be having an affair with her personal trainer. Jack didn't sound surprised, just professional. Happens more often than you'd think, Mr. Cooper. Personal trainers, yoga instructors, tennis coaches. Physical proximity, endorphins, it's a dangerous combo. I can start Monday. Do you have the times she usually meets him? Charles did. The deleted messages contained dates and times. Tuesdays and Thursdays, always at noon, always at the same hotel near O'Hare International Airport, far enough from downtown to avoid running into anyone they knew. Jack said he'd need no more than 48 hours. The cost would be $2,500 up front, plus expenses. Charles didn't hesitate. He needed the truth, not assumptions. Monday arrived, and Lauren left for work as usual, kissing Charles on the cheek and saying she had a busy day ahead. Charles went to his office, met with clients, analyzed portfolios, but his mind was split. Tuesday was worse. He knew it was the day of the supposed meeting. At 11:45 a.m., he received a text from Jack, on site. Waiting. Charles pretended to work, but his eyes kept drifting back to his phone. 12:20 p.m. Another message. Confirmed. Both entered the hotel. Room 314. Charles closed his eyes for a moment and took a deep breath. Part of him still hoped he was wrong, still wished there was some innocent explanation. But he knew there wasn't. At 2:15 p.m., another message from Jack, they left separately. She went first, he followed 10 minutes later. "I've got photos. Can I deliver them to your office at 6? Charles replied yes. The rest of the day passed in a fog. He cancelled 2 meetings, telling his assistant he wasn't feeling well. It wasn't a lie. At exactly 6, Jack Donovan showed up at Charles's office carrying a manila envelope. He was a man in his 50s, gray-haired, with a neutral expression. He placed the envelope on the desk and said, "I'm sorry, Mr. Cooper. It's never easy." Charles opened the envelope. Inside was a series of high-resolution printed photographs. Lauren entering the hotel in workout clothes but carrying a large bag. Nicholas Torres arriving minutes later, a man around 30, athletic, generically handsome in a way Charles imagined appealed to many female clients. Photos of them entering the elevator together. And the worst of all, a distant shot taken through a partially open window of room 314, showing Lauren and Nicholas in an intimate embrace, her laughing, him kissing her neck. Jack had done more than just take photos. He also handed Charles a detailed report. "I ran a basic background check on Nicholas Torres. He's married, Mr. Cooper. His wife's name is Melissa Torres, she's an elementary school teacher. They have a 3-year-old daughter. I thought you'd want to know." Charles looked at Jack and slowly nodded. "She doesn't know?" Jack shook his head. "Not as far as I could tell. He's careful. Uses work as the perfect alibi." Charles paid Jack, thanked him for his work, and stayed alone in the office after the investigator left. He looked again at the photos, one by one, forcing himself to process the reality. His wife, the woman he'd shared 7 years with, plans, dreams, a home, a life, was cheating on him with a married personal trainer, meeting for midday hotel trysts while he worked to maintain their lifestyle. The pain Charles felt wasn't just emotional. It was physical too, a pressure in his chest, constant nausea. But along with the pain came something colder, more controlled, anger. Not explosive or irrational anger, but the calculated anger of a man who realized he'd been made a fool. Charles wouldn't confront Lauren right away. He needed a plan, a way to turn this situation in his favor. Then he remembered the detail Jack had mentioned: Nicholas was married. Melissa Torres didn't know anything. Wednesday morning, Charles called the number for Melissa that Jack had included in the report. She answered cheerfully, probably thinking it was a parent calling about a student. "Hello, Mrs. Torres. My name is Charles Cooper. You don't know me, but I need to talk to you about something important involving your husband, Nicholas." There was a pause, the cheerfulness in Melissa's voice vanished. "What's this about?" Charles got straight to the point. "Your husband is having an affair with my wife. I have photographic evidence. I believe you have a right to know." Silence lingered on the other end for several long seconds. Then Melissa said, her voice trembling, "Are you sure?" Charles replied that he was absolutely certain. "I can email you the photos if you'd like, but it might be better if we met in person. This is delicate." Melissa agreed, still in shock. They arranged to meet Thursday morning at a discreet cafe. When Charles met Melissa Torres, he saw a woman who looked exhausted, her eyes red as if she'd been crying all night. She held her coffee cup with both hands, as if the warmth were the only thing keeping her together. Charles showed her the photos, feeling a pang of guilt for being the bearer of such news, but also knowing it was the right thing to do. Melissa examined each photo with silent tears streaming down her face. "I suspected," she whispered. "But I didn't want to believe it. He always has excuses, he's always busy with clients." Charles felt empathy for her. They were both victims, deceived by people they'd trusted. "There's something else you should know," Charles said, then told her about Lauren, how she was an event coordinator with a broad network of corporate contacts. "I believe your husband was using my wife to land wealthy new clients. She organized events for big companies, new executives, people with money. Nicholas is smart. He wasn't just cheating, he was building a client list through her. Melissa closed her eyes, processing. His income has increased a lot over the last few months. He said it was because he was getting known, building a reputation. But now it makes sense. She looked at Charles with sudden resolve. What are you going to do? Charles replied calmly, I'll confront my wife tonight. And I think it would be fitting if you confronted Nicholas at the exact same time, maybe at my house. They need to see that their actions have consequences. Melissa immediately agreed. There was a hunger for justice in her eyes that Charles recognized because he felt it too. They worked out the details. Charles would text Lauren saying he needed to talk about something urgent when she got home from work. Melissa would show up 30 minutes later, bringing Nicholas along under the pretense that Charles wanted to hire his services. It would be a dual confrontation, a controlled explosion. Thursday night at 7, Lauren came home to find Charles sitting in the living room, soft lighting, the atmosphere deceptively calm. Hi, honey. You said you needed to talk about something urgent? She was still dressed for work, a pencil skirt and blouse, her hair in an elegant bun. Charles pointed to the sofa. Sit. Please. Something in his tone made Lauren hesitate, but she sat, placing her bag beside her. Charles didn't waste time with preliminaries. I know about you and Nicholas Torres. The words dropped like stones into still water. Lauren instantly turned pale, mouth agape, eyes wide. Charles, what are you talking about? He picked up the envelope of photos from the coffee table and tossed it onto her lap. Don't insult me by pretending innocence. I have proof, photos, emails, schedules. I know everything. Lauren opened the envelope with trembling hands and saw the photos. Her expression cycled through several phases, shock, panic, and then something Charles hadn't expected, a feeble attempt to downplay it. She let out a forced, nervous little laugh. Charles, okay, this isn't what you think. It was just fun. Nothing serious. I still love you. Charles felt anger rise like lava. Fun? You call betraying your husband in midday hotel rooms fun? Lauren raised her hands defensively. It was a mistake, I know, but it didn't mean anything. Just a few times, I swear. Charles stood up and slowly walked until he was standing in front of her. A few times? Lauren, I read the emails. It's been months. Regular meetings. Messages about how much you looked forward to seeing him. Don't make me look like a fool twice. Lauren started crying, but the tears were born of desperation at being caught, not genuine remorse. Please, Charles, we can get past this. I'll end it with him right now, I'll never see him again, I promise. Just then, the doorbell rang. Lauren looked toward the door, confused. Charles gave a cold smile. Ah, right. Wait, we have company. He went to the door and opened it. Standing outside were Melissa Torres, holding the hand of a small girl, and Nicholas Torres, completely bewildered. Charles? You called saying you urgently wanted to discuss personal training. Nicholas glanced at his wife and daughter beside him, clearly puzzled as to why they were there. Melissa explained coolly, I insisted on coming along. Said we needed to talk to you too, Nicholas, a family matter that can't wait. Charles offered a humorless smile. Of course, come in. Nicholas stepped inside hesitantly, still not understanding why Melissa had insisted on accompanying him. When he saw Lauren on the sofa surrounded by scattered photos, his face went white. Melissa followed closely behind, holding her daughter's hand tightly. She hadn't had anyone to leave the child with on short notice, and she wasn't about to miss this moment. She looked straight at the man she thought she knew. The little girl, oblivious to the tension, clutched a stuffed bear. Nicholas, Melissa said, her voice unnaturally firm, I think we have something to talk about. Lauren looked from Charles to Melissa, then to Nicholas, and finally understood. She'd been exposed, not just to her husband, but to her lover's wife. "Charles, you didn't have to do this," she whispered, but it was already too late. Nicholas tried to speak. "Look, this is a misunderstanding," Charles cut him off. "A misunderstanding? You and my wife have been meeting in hotels for months. Your wife didn't know. My wife thought it was just fun. But I discovered something interesting, Nicholas." Charles picked up another sheet of paper from the table, a printout he'd prepared. "In the last 6 months, you gained 5 new high-end corporate clients. All of them were referrals from Lauren, through the events she organized. CEOs, CFOs, people who pay $200 an hour for training. You weren't just using my wife sexually, you were using her professionally. She was your bridge to other people's money." Nicholas opened his mouth, closed it, tried again. It wasn't like that, but Melissa was already staring at him with a mix of disgust and disbelief. "You made a fool of me, Nicholas. While I took care of our daughter, worked, kept our home running, you were, with her?" She pointed at Lauren with contempt. The little girl began to cry, sensing the tension in the air, and Melissa picked her up, automatically comforting her even through her own pain. Lauren finally found her voice, but only to lash out. "You're making a spectacle of this, Charles. We could have handled it between us." Charles gave a bitter laugh. "Handle it? How would you have handled it, Lauren? With more lies? More secret meetings? I deserve better than that. So does Melissa." He turned to Melissa. "I'm sorry I had to involve you in this, especially in front of your daughter. But I thought you had a right to know the truth." Melissa nodded, tears streaming, but holding on to her dignity. "I appreciate it. I'd rather have painful truth than comfortable lies." She looked at Nicholas. "We're done. I'll call a lawyer tomorrow. You can pick up your things over the weekend." Nicholas tried to approach her. "Mel, please, we can talk," but she was already walking out, holding her daughter firmly. Nicholas stood there, pathetic, glancing between Charles and Lauren. I'm sorry." Charles crossed his arms. "Leave. Now. And if I find out you've gone near my wife again, I'll make sure all your clients know exactly what kind of professional you really are." Nicholas hurried out, nearly running for the door. Now Lauren and Charles were alone, the apartment silent and heavy. "You've ruined everything," she said, her voice full of anger. Charles slowly shook his head. "No, Lauren. You ruined it. I just exposed it. There's a difference." He sat in the armchair opposite hers. "Tomorrow, I'm filing for divorce. You can stay here tonight, but I suggest you find somewhere else to go. Our marriage is over." Lauren tried to argue, cry, beg, but Charles remained unmoved. He'd made his decision. The following weeks blurred into lawyers, paperwork, and asset division. Lauren tried to fight for the house, but the infidelity evidence strengthened Charles's position in negotiations. In the final settlement, he kept most of the assets. What Charles hadn't expected was the ripple effect. 3 of the 5 corporate clients Nicholas had gained through Lauren cancelled their contracts as soon as they heard about the scandal. Lauren lost 2 major contracts when the story leaked. Corporate events rely on trust, and Lauren had shown she lacked it. 6 months later, Charles ran into Lauren at a networking event. She looked visibly different, thinner, with deep under-eye circles. She saw him, hesitated, but approached. "Charles. How are you?" He greeted her politely but coolly. "Fine. And you?" Lauren shrugged. "Getting by. Lost some clients, but I'm rebuilding." Charles nodded. "Good luck with that." He was about to walk away when Lauren grabbed his arm. "I'm really sorry. I was an idiot." Charles looked down at her hand until she let go. You were. And choices have consequences. She seemed to shrink. Nicholas and it didn't work out. He blamed me for losing clients. Charles felt a bitter irony. And what did you expect? That he'd be loyal? Lauren fell silent. Charles added, he used you, for clients, for sex, for his ego. You threw away a solid marriage for someone who only cared about what you could give him. Lauren started crying right there. I know. I ruined everything. You were a good husband, and I didn't appreciate you. Charles felt a pang, maybe pity, but it wasn't enough. I hope you learn from it. But I won't be part of your redemption. Take care, Lauren. And he walked away, leaving her behind. In the months that followed, Charles methodically rebuilt his life. He focused on work, expanded his firm, hired 2 new consultants. He started therapy to process the betrayal. He made new friends and revived neglected hobbies. A year after the divorce, Charles met Amanda at a cafe. She worked as an investment analyst and had a sharp sense of humor. They exchanged numbers. It wasn't love at first sight, but it was a beginning. Charles learned that broken trust is hard to rebuild, but not impossible. He learned that dignity matters, and that exposing the truth isn't the same as revenge. People like Lauren and Nicholas live in worlds where consequences are abstract, until they knock on the door. Surviving betrayal doesn't just mean continuing to exist. It means actively choosing to rebuild through the pain. It means looking in the mirror and recognizing the man staring back, someone wounded, but not destroyed. Lauren moved to Milwaukee, trying to start over far from the scandal. Nicholas lost his job at Elite Fitness after clients complained. Melissa divorced him and gained custody of their daughter. Sometimes, simply letting the truth come to light is enough. Charles rarely thinks about them anymore. When he does, it's not with anger, but with distant sadness. He moves forward because he chose not to let Lauren's betrayal define the rest of his life. On quiet nights in his new penthouse overlooking Lake Michigan, Charles reflects on how strange life is. You build something with someone, brick by brick, believing it's solid, and then discover the foundation was cracked all along. But finding the crack doesn't mean crumbling with it. It means learning to build better next time, with stronger materials. And maybe with someone who also understands the value of what's being built. Thank you for watching the video. If you enjoyed it, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you won't miss any updates. See you next time.